Dear student, today I am here with my second lecture on business statistics in English. Chapter 1, Introduction, Data Collection. Today I will going to discuss about data definition, sources of data, primary data, secondary data, effective use, and collection methods of various types of data. And this lecture will be helpful for the student of management, accounting, finance, banking, marketing, second year students, and the Open University of Bangladesh and other students in various disciplines. So the outcome of these lectures will be statistical data. What is statistical data? Secondary data. What are the sources of secondary data? Limitations or precautions during the use of secondary data. What is the difference between primary data and secondary data? How should use primary data? What are the methods of collecting primary data? How to edit primary data? And some names of new sources of data. This question will be able to answer by the students if they attentively hear this lecture. These questions basically develop from the previous questions of National University and other university question papers. So first I am going to define what is data or statistical data. Data or statistical data is the numerical or quantitative facts or information relating to the condition of people in a state or are presented in a classified arrangement like tables or others. Data is the numerical or quantitative facts or information. Either it is raw or processed, both are data if they are numerically presented. Usually we observe that the data are basically shows by tables or other methods of presentation. So what are the basic sources of data? Data sources are basically categorized in three types: secondary data, primary source, and internal records of data. Internal records are mainly production records, cash book, payroll, etc. These are called sources of business data. Sometimes it may be asked to the students what are the sources of business data. So these are the basic sources of business data. What is secondary data? Secondary data is the data which are already been collected and made really available for other research purpose. The secondary data, it is already collected and made available for other research purpose. Suppose when we see data in journals, reports, it may be published from government agency or others, or various publications and professional bodies. These data are called secondary data. Secondary data already used by others and it is processed and they have fulfilled their purpose of this data. So if anyone other than the original researcher use this data, these data will be called secondary data. And when should use? So when we will go to use secondary data? So there are three situations: when the volume of data is large quantity, and when data collection method is very expensive and required long time. So when these three factors are required for considering the usage of data, then we will go to use secondary data. So these are the sources, the graphical presentation of some sources of data: books, others, organization website, and various sources of data that are already published. It is secondary data. What are the limitations of using secondary data or what precautions we should take during the use of secondary data. There are some basic precautions matters we should give our attention. Need more utmost care to use. Phase value may mislead, error for biasness, inadequate sample size, errors of definition, arithmetical errors, poor reliability. These are the major limitation of secondary data. So, when we go to use secondary data, this limitation must be considered. We may go some short elaboration about this limitation. Need utmost care to use. When we use secondary data, we always should be give more attention about the reliability of the data, about their uses. Phase value may mislead. Sometimes the well-known organizations may use some data. The user may use this data only by considering the organization's face value, but it is not always uh, true that the renowned organizations may use this data effectively, but the new users who are going to use this data, this data may not be essential for may not be matched with his purpose. Error for biasness. Sometimes data that are already used maybe based on some biasness. So these types of data, when we observe some biasness, we must have to skip this data. You need to get sample size. Sometimes secondary data sample size may be small sample size, but the users required big sample size. In this situation, this data may not be fit for the users. Errors of definition. Definition basically define the purpose and other objectives of the collection of data. Secondary data are collected by other users to serve his purpose, but this purpose may not be fit with the other users. So errors of definition may be considered here. Arithmetical errors. Sometimes there are arithmetical errors also observed in secondary data. These errors must be carefully removed during the use of secondary data. Poor reliability. We must consider the reliability or how the data are efficient or how the data are collected by using the scientific method. If these data are not give more attention about their reliability, so we should not use this data. So these precautions or these limitations must be considered during the use of secondary data. So if there is a question for the student, secondary source is not as reliable as primary source. These types of quotation you may be able to answer by considering these matters. If you know these matters, you can easily answer these types of questions. Now we focus on primary data. Primary data which are measured from the observation or recorded as part of the original study, neither from the internal records nor in published records. So when the data are measured from the observation or recorded, and it is a part of the original study, not already published study. Here it is. It is neither from internal records or published sources. Primary data must be collected from the original sources. It is not from the internal record or published sources. So we must have to make clear idea about the primary data, what it is, and what are the sources of primary data. Friends, the sources is first-hand investigation, original data. So it cannot be collected from internal records or public sources. When to use primary data? It is very expensive and time-consuming matters to collect it. So, in which situation we will go for use primary data? Basically, these are the two things: lack of suitable secondary or internal data, or availability of time, money, and power. So when we have no suitable secondary data or internal data in our hand, or uh, variable sources for reliable sources for suitable secondary data or internal data, we can go for use primary data. And during the use of primary data, main things is time, money, and manpower. When you have available time and money and required manpower for collecting the data, we should go for primary data. So these two things always be remembered for using primary data. Two basic methods for collecting primary data. There are two methods we can use for collecting primary data. One method is questioning, and these questioning activities will be done by using questionnaire. Questioning or interviewing people that are collected by asking questions in person or in writing. Questioning method may be in person or in writing. To desired people. Desired people means sample size, desired sample, desired sample. So this data can be collected by questioning, by using questionnaire. And another method is observation. Here there is no question, only observes in the objects or action. People only observe, and mechanical device may be used for making observation more effective. In these two pictures, it is a traditional classroom, and the teacher, researchers asking various questions with them. This method is called questioning, and this one, it is observing. These people observe. This is the researcher or collector of data, and he is the sample. He is observing his activities, his behavior, his actions, subsection, objects, and many things. So there is no matter of asking questions. So this is observation and this is questioning method. These two methods for collecting primary data. So what we should do after collecting the primary data? After collecting primary data, it is a major task to edit this data. How these data are edited, or why these data are edited. So these factors we should consider during the editing of data. First one, editing for completeness. Completeness depends on many things. What is completeness? Completeness, the researcher must observe the data, observe the questionnaire about answer of each question is finished. Vital question are answered by the interviewee. Required information for further contact. If there are any discrepancy or if there are any gap, researcher can easily communicate with the interviewee in the next step. So these are the meaning of completeness. And what is editing for consistency? Consistency means continuity. Avoid contradictory questions. In questionnaire, we must avoid contradictory questions. Contradictory question means two questions may be contradict with others. If we ask a question on people that if you are married, and if you answer another question, how many children do you have? If the first question is how many children do you have, and again if we ask are you married, so second question will be contradictory question. So during the preparation of questionnaire, we must avoid consistency. We must avoid contradictory questions. This is called consistency. Editing for accuracy. What is accuracy? Accuracy is the correctness of information in all aspects, and verification of faulty information. If there are any misleading information or faulty information are provided by the interview, we must consider this matter seriously. Removing arithmetical error. If there are any arithmetical error happened during the calculation or other things, we must correct this. So these three things: correctness of information, verification of faulty information, removing arithmetical errors. These three things are called accuracy. And this is the third major steps for editing data. And last and final steps for editing data is homogeneity. What is homogeneity? Homogeneity is similar sense by different respondents. One question may create various meaning to different peoples. But if this happens, our collected information may be misleading. We should design the question in such a way that the one question have same meaning to all respondents. So these four things we should consider during the editing primary data. So my dear students and viewers, if you have any question regarding the contents of these presentations, you can mail me by using my email address shiponmgt@yahoo.com and by following my YouTube channel Creative Support. So thank you very much for your patience hearing.